Before proceeding further, it may be as well to take a hasty glance at the nervous system. The nervous system of man is divided into two great systems, the cerebrospinal system and the sympathetic system. The cerebrospinal system consists of all that parts of the nervous system contained within the cranial activity and the spinal canal, the brain and the spinal cord, together with the nerves which branch off from the same. This system presides over the functions of animal life known as volition, sensation, etc. The sympathetic system includes all that part of the nervous system located principally in the thoracic, abdominal, and pelvic cavities, and which is distributed to the internal organs. It has control over the involuntary processes such as growth, nutrition, etc. The cerebrospinal system attends to all the seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, feeling, etc. It sets things in motion. It is used by the ego to think, to manifest consciousness. It is the instrument with which the ego communicates with the outside world. This system may be likened to a telephone system, with the brain as the central office and the spinal column and nerves as cables and wires respectively. The brain is a great mass of nerve tissue and consists of three parts: the cerebrum or brain proper, which occupies the upper, front, middle, and back portion of the skull; the cerebellum or little brain, which fills the lower and back portion of the skull; and the medulla oblongata, which is in the broadened commencement of the spinal cord, lying before and in front of the cerebellum. The cerebrum is the organ of that part of the mind which manifests itself in intellectual action. The cerebellum regulates the movements of the voluntary muscles. The medulla oblongata is the upper and large end of the spinal cord, and from it and the cerebrum branch forth the cranial nerves which reach to various parts of the head, to the organs of special sense, and to some of the thoracic and abdominal organs, and to the organs of respiration. The spinal cord or spinal marrow fills the spinal canal in the vertebral column, or backbone. It is a long mass of nerve tissue, branching off at the several vertebrae to nerves communicating with all parts of the body. The spinal cord is like a large telephone cable, and the emerging nerves are like the private wires connecting therewith. The sympathetic nervous system consists of a double chain of ganglia on the side of the spinal column, and scattered ganglia in the head, neck, chest, and abdomen. A ganglion is a mass of nervous matter including nerve cells. These ganglia are connected with each other by filaments and are also connected with the cerebrospinal system by motor and sensory nerves. From these ganglia, numerous fibers branch out to the organs of the body, blood vessels, etc. At various points, the nerves meet together and form what are known as plexuses. The sympathetic system practically controls the involuntary processes such as circulation, respiration, and digestion. The power of force transmitted from the brain to all parts of the body by means of the nerves is known to Western science as nerve force, although the yogi knows it to be a manifestation of prana. In character and rapidity, it resembles the electric current. It will be seen that without this nerve force, the heart cannot beat, the blood cannot circulate, the lungs cannot breathe, the various organs cannot function. In fact, the machinery of the body comes to a stop without it. Nay more, even the brain cannot think without prana being present. When these facts are considered, the importance of the absorption of prana must be evident to all, and the science of breath assumes an importance even greater than that accorded it by Western science. We allude to what Western science terms the solar plexus, and which it considers as merely one of a series of certain matted nets of sympathetic nerves with their ganglia found in various parts of the body. Yogi science teaches that this solar plexus is really a most important part of the nervous system, and that it is a form of brain, playing one of the principal parts in the human economy. Western science seems to be moving gradually towards a recognition of this fact, which has been known to the yogis of the East for centuries, and some recent Western writers have termed the solar plexus the abdominal brain. The solar plexus is situated in the epigastric region just back of the pit of the stomach on either side of the spinal column. It is composed of white and gray brain matter, similar to that composing the other brains of man. It has control of the main internal organs of man and plays a much more important part than is generally recognized. We will not go into the yogi theory regarding the solar plexus, further than to say that they know it as the great central storehouse of prana. Men have been known to be instantly killed by a severe blow over the solar plexus, and prize fighters recognize its vulnerability and frequently temporarily paralyze their opponents by a blow over this region. The name solar is well bestowed on this brain as it radiates strength and energy to all parts of the body, even the upper brains depending largely upon it as a storehouse of prana. Sooner or later, Western science will fully recognize the real function of the solar plexus and will accord it to a far more important place than it now occupies in their textbooks and teachings. One of the first lessons in the yogi science of breath is to learn how to breathe through the nostrils and to overcome the common practice of mouth breathing. The breathing mechanism of man is so constructed that he may breathe either through the mouth or nasal tubes, but it is a matter of vital importance to him which method he follows, as one brings health and strength and the other disease and weakness. Many of the diseases to which civilized man is subject are undoubtedly caused by this common habit of mouth breathing, and many cases of cold and catarrhal infections are also attributable to the same cause. Many persons who, for the sake of appearances, keep their mouth closed during the day, persist in mouth breathing at night, and often contract disease in this way. Carefully conducted scientific experiments have shown that soldiers and sailors who sleep with their mouths open are much more liable to contract contagious diseases than those who properly breathe through their nostrils. The organs of respiration have their only protective apparatus, filter, or dust catcher in the nostrils. When the breath is taken through the mouth, there is nothing from the mouth to the lungs to strain the air or to catch the dust and other foreign matter in the air. From mouth to lungs, the dirt or impure substance has a clear track, and the entire respiratory system is unprotected. And moreover, such incorrect breathing admits cold air to the organs, thereby injuring them. Inflammation of the respiratory organs often results from the inhalation of cold air through the mouth. The man who breathes through the mouth at night always awakens with a parched feeling in the mouth and a dryness in the throat. He is violating one of nature's laws and is sowing the seeds of disease. One more, remember that the mouth affords no protection to the respiratory organs, and cold air, dust, and impurities and germs readily enter by that door. On the other hand, the nostrils and nasal passages show evidence of the careful design of nature in this respect. The nostrils are two narrow, tortuous chambers containing numerous bristly hairs which serve the purpose of a filter or sieve to strain the air of its impurities, etc., which are expelled when the breath is exhaled. Not only do the nostrils serve this important purpose, but they also perform an important function in warming the air inhaled. The long, narrow, winding nostrils are filled with warm mucous membrane, which coming in contact with the inhaled air warms it so that it can do no damage to the delicate organs of the throat or to the lungs. No animal, excepting man, sleeps with the mouth open or breathes through the mouth, and in fact it is believed that it is only civilized man who so perverts nature's functions, as the savage and barbarian races almost invariably breathe correctly. It is probable that this unnatural habit among civilized men has been acquired through unnatural methods of living, enervating luxuries, and excessive warmth. The refining, filtering, and straining apparatus of the nostrils renders the air fit to reach the delicate organs of the throat and the lungs, and the air is not fit to so reach these organs until it has passed through nature's refining process. The impurities which are stopped and retained by the sieves and mucous membrane of the nostrils are thrown out again by the expelled breath and exhalation. And in case they have accumulated too rapidly or have managed to escape through their sieves and have penetrated forbidden regions, nature protects us by producing a sneeze, which violently ejects the intruder. The air, when it enters the lungs, is as different from the outside air, as is distilled water different from the water of the cistern. The intricate purifying organization of the nostrils, arresting and holding the impure particles in the air, is as important as is the action of the mouth in stopping cherry stones and fish bones and preventing them from being carried on to the stomach. Man should no more breathe through his mouth than he would attempt to take food through his nose. Another feature of mouth breathing is that nasal passages, being thus comparatively unused, consequently fail to keep themselves clean and clear and become clogged up and unclean, and are apt to contract local diseases. Like abandoned roads that soon become filled with weeds and rubbish, unused nostrils become filled with impurities and foul matter. One who habitually breathes through the nostrils is not likely to be troubled with clogged or stuffy nostrils, but for the benefit of those who have been more or less addicted to the unnatural mouth breathing and who wish to acquire the natural and rational methods, it may perhaps be well to add a few words regarding the way to keep their nostrils clean and free from impurities. A favorite Oriental method is to snuff a little water up the nostrils, allowing it to run down the passage into the throat, from thence it may be ejected through the mouth. Some Hindu-Yogis immerse the face in a bowl of water and by a sort of suction draw in quite a quantity of water, but this latter method requires considerable practice, and the first method is equally efficacious and much more easily performed. Another good plan is to open the window and breathe freely, closing one nostril with the finger or thumb, sniffing up the air through the open nostril. Then repeat the process on the other nostril. Repeat several times, changing nostrils. This method will usually clear the nostrils of obstructions. A little care and attention will result in the nostrils becoming clean and remaining so. We have given considerable space to this subject of nostril breathing, not only because of its great importance in reference to health, but because nostril breathing is a prerequisite to the practice of the breathing exercises to be given later, and because nostril breathing is one of the basic principles underlying the yogi science of breath. We urge upon the student the necessity of acquiring this method of breathing if he has not, and caution him against dismissing this phase of the subject as unimportant. In the consideration of the question of respiration, we must begin by considering the mechanical arrangements whereby the respiratory movements are effected. The mechanics of respiration manifest through 1. The elastic movements of the lungs, and 2. The activities of the sides and bottom of the thoracic cavity in which the lungs are contained. The thorax is that portion of the trunk between the neck and the abdomen, the cavity of which, known as the thoracic cavity, is occupied mainly by the lungs and heart. It is bounded by the spinal column, the ribs with their cartilages, and the breastbone, and below by the diaphragm. It is generally spoken of as the chest. It has been compared to a completely shut conical box, the small end of which is turned upward, the back of the box being formed by the spinal column, the front by the breastbone, and the sides by the ribs. The ribs are 24 in number, 12 on each side, and emerge from each side of the spinal column. The upper 7 pairs are known as true ribs, being fastened to the breastbone direct, while the lower 5 pairs are called false ribs, or floating ribs, because they are not so fastened, the upper 2 of them being fastened to the breastbone direct, while the lower 5 having no cartilages, their forward ends being free. The ribs are moved in respiration by 2 superficial muscular layers, known as the intercostal muscles. The diaphragm, the muscular partition before alluded to, separates the chest box from the abdominal cavity. In the act of inhalation, the muscles expand the lungs so that a vacuum is created and the air rushes in accordance with the well-known law of physics. Everything depends upon the muscles concerned in the process of respiration, which we may, as for convenience, term the respiratory muscles. Without the aid of these muscles, the lungs cannot expand, and upon the proper use and control of these muscles, the science of breath largely depends. The proper control of these muscles will result in ability to attain the maximum degree of lung expansion and the greatest amount of the life-giving properties of the air into the system. The yogis classify respiration into 4 methods. 1. High breathing. 2. Mid breathing. 3. Low breathing. And 4. Yogi complete breathing. We will give a general idea of the first 3 methods and a more extended treatment of the 4th method, upon which the yogi science of breath is largely based. High breathing. This form of breathing is known to the Western world as clavicular breathing or collarbone breathing. One breathing in this way elevates the ribs and raises the collarbone and shoulders, at the same time drawing in the abdomen and pushing its contents up against the diaphragm, which in turn is raised. The upper part of the chest and lungs, which is the smallest, is used, and consequently, but a minimum of amount of air enters the lungs. In addition to this diaphragm being raised, there can be no expansion in that direction. A study of the anatomy of the chest will convince any student that in this way a maximum amount of effort is used to obtain a minimum amount of benefit. High breathing is probably the worst form of breathing known to man and requires the greatest expenditure of energy with the smallest amount of benefit. It is an energy-wasting, poor returns plan. It is quite common among the Western races, many women being addicted to it, and even singers, clergymen, lawyers, and others, who should know better, using it ignorantly. Many diseases of the vocal organs and organs of respiration may be directly traced to this barbarous method of breathing, and the straining of delicate organs caused by this method often results in the harsh, disagreeable voices heard on all sides. If the student has any doubts about what has been said regarding this form of breathing, let him try the experiment of expelling all the air from his lungs, then standing erect, with hands at sides, let him raise the shoulders and collarbone and inhale. He will find that the amount of air inhaled far below normal. Then let him inhale a full breath after dropping the shoulders and collarbone, and he will receive an object lesson in breathing which he will be apt to remember much longer than he would any words printed or spoken. Mid-breathing. This method of respiration is known to Western students as rib breathing or intercostal breathing, and while less objectionable than high breathing, is far inferior to either low breathing or to the yogi complete breath. In mid-breathing, the diaphragm is pushed upward and the abdomen drawn in. The ribs are raised somewhat and the chest is partially expanded. It is quite common among men who have no study of the subject. As there are two better methods known, we give it only passing notice, and that principally to call your attention to its shortcomings. 3. Low breathing. This form of respiration is far better than either of the two preceding forms, and of recent years many Western writers have extolled its merits and have exploited it under the names of abdominal breathing, deep breathing, diaphragmic breathing, etc., etc. And much good has been accomplished by the attention of the public having been directed to the subject, and many having been induced to substitute it for the inferior and injurious methods above alluded to. Many systems of breathing have been built around low breathing, and students have paid high prices to learn the new systems. But, as we have said, much good has resulted, and after all, the students who paid high prices to learn revamped old systems undoubtedly got their money's worth if they were induced to discard the old methods of high and low breathing. Although many Western authorities write and speak of this method as the best known form of breathing, the yogis know it to be but a part of a system which they have used for centuries and which they know as the complete breath. It must be admitted, however, that one must be acquainted with the principles of low breathing before he can grasp the idea of complete breathing. Let us again consider the diaphragm. What is it? We have seen that it is the great partition muscle which separates the chest and its contents from the abdomen and its contents. When at rest, it presents a concave surface to the abdomen. That is, the diaphragm as viewed from the abdomen would seem like the sky is viewed from the earth, the interior of an arched surface. Consequently, the side of the diaphragm toward the chest organs is like a protruding, rounded surface-like hill. When the diaphragm is brought into use, the hill formation is lowered and the diaphragm presses upon the abdominal organs and forces out the abdomen. In low breathing, the lungs are given freer play in the methods already mentioned, and consequently, more air is inhaled. This fact has led the majority of Western writers to speak and write of low breathing, which they call abdominal breathing, as the high and the best method known to science. But the Oriental yogi has long known of a better method, and some few Western writers have also recognized this fact. The trouble with all methods of breathing, other than yogi complete breathing, is that in none of these methods do the lungs become filled with air. At the best, only a portion of the lung space is filled, even in low breathing. High breathing fills only the upper portion of the lungs, and mid-breathing fills only the middle and a portion of the upper parts. Low breathing fills only the lower and middle parts. It is evident that any method that fills the entire lung space must be far preferable to those filling only certain parts. Any method which will fill the entire lung space must be of the greatest value to man and in the great way of allowing him to absorb the greatest quantity of oxygen and to store away the greatest amount of prana. The complete breath is known to the yogis to be the best method of respiration known to science. The yogi complete breath. Yogi complete breathing includes all the good points of high breathing, mid breathing, and low breathing, with the objectionable feature of each eliminated. It brings into play the entire respiratory apparatus, every part of the lungs, every air cell, every respiratory muscle. The entire respiratory organism responds to this method of breathing, and the maximum amount of benefit is derived from the minimum expenditure of energy. The chest cavity is increased to its normal limits in all directions, and every part of the machinery performs its natural work and functions. One of the most important features of this method of breathing is the fact that the respiratory muscles are fully called into play, whereas in the other forms of breathing only a portion of these muscles are so used. In complete breathing, among other muscles, these controlling the ribs are actively used, which increases the space in which the lungs may expand and also give the proper support to the organs when needed. Nature availing herself of the perfection of the principle of leverage in this process. Certain muscles hold the lower ribs firmly in position, while other muscles bend them outward. Then again, in this method, the diaphragm is under perfect control and is able to perform its functions properly, and in such manner as to yield the maximum degree of service. In the rib action, above alluded to, the lower ribs are controlled by the diaphragm, which draws them slightly downward, while other muscles hold them in place and the intercostal muscles force them outward, which combined action increases the mid-chest cavity to its maximum. In addition to this muscular action, the upper ribs are also lifted and forced outward by the intercostal muscles, which increase the capacity of the upper chest to its fullest extent. If you have studied the special features of the four given methods of breathing, you will at once see that the complete breath comprises all the advantageous features of the three other methods, plus the reciprocal advantages accruing from the combined action of the high chest, mid chest, and diaphragmic regions, and the normal rhythm thus obtained. In our next chapter, we will take up the complete breath in practice and will give full directions for the acquirement of the superior method of breathing with exercises, etc.